Thank you, Rosel. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this brown bag discussion on Laudato Si, climate change and the energy transition, opportunities for collective action among Jesuit universities. The Social Finance Lab aims to advance energy transition and climate action through three streams of work. One, engaging talents within the universities and providing platforms for multi-site, multi-campus collaboration. Second, co-designing impact investment instruments and mobilizing capital that may finance the activities that produce social returns on investment, including climate transition. And then third, create spaces for university government and private sector co-creation. In today's discussion, we hope to have a better understanding of how Jesuit universities can collectively engage our host cities and the country. In a sense, pwede nating isipin na parang living labs, our campuses can be living labs and our cities can be living labs for energy transition, meaning we have to innovate our way forward, no? From the engineering to the policy to the governance aspects of energy transition. How can student papers, NSTP projects, thesis projects support real-world energy transition through our universities? And how might thousands of students serve as catalysts for these transitions? Hopefully, towards the end of this conversation, we will see how we can work together. And after this, we plan to similarly engage other Jesuit universities in the region, such as Sophia University in Japan, Sanata Dharma University in Indonesia, and Loyola College in India. To kick off and to warm up the conversation, we would like to invite Sergius Santos. If you're already in the room, Sergius, we hope you can come on and share already. Sergius Santos was started an energy startup as a student, and they have grown their startup in the energy space remarkably in just a few years. So first, let's hear from Sergius Santos. Sergius? Sergius. Okay. Well, maybe Sergius was not able to make it. He's not yet logged in. So maybe, Doc Malu, we can proceed to our next speaker first. Prof. Malu.
Yes, thank you, Sir Elmer. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this brown bag discussion. In this afternoon's discussion, we're hoping to give the community of Jesuit universities an overview of how university students can advance Laudato Si in our cities. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our first panelist, Mr. Yeb Sano. Mr. Yeb Sano is a climate justice activist from the Philippines and currently serves as the executive director of Greenpeace Southeast Asia. He's also the vice chair of the board of the Laudato Si movement, the global Catholic climate movement. Previously, he was a commissioner of the Philippines Climate Change Commission, the country's lead policymaking government body on climate change. Mr. Sano was the Philippines' chief negotiator in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and was widely known for championing climate justice in the climate negotiations. He has been working with local communities and international bodies for more than 26 years, tackling domestic and international issues that relate to climate policy, clean energy, international finance, biodiversity, marine conservation, disaster risk reduction, and governance, including a stint as the director of the Climate and Energy Program of the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Mr. Yeb led a 1,500-kilometer walk with other climate activists from Rome to Paris in 2015. Friends, let us all welcome Mr. Sano. Sir?
Thank you so much, Malut, and hello to everybody. Pleasant day to all of you. It's a privilege and honor to be in this conversation today in this brown bag discussion. May I just ask if I am able to share a few slides? Is that possible?
Yes, please do. You
Okay.
can share.
So I'll do that, and okay, I hope you can see my slides.
Yep, yep.
Okay. So my task this afternoon is to talk about Laudato Si, which is a letter that Pope Francis gave to all of us or sent to all of us in 2015, and relate that with how we advocate for action on the environment, and in particular for much of our topic for today is how we amplify and accelerate, the how we push the envelope on transitioning of cities into more sustainable into a more sustainable trajectory. So if we might want to review Laudato Si, which was published by the Pope Francis in 2015, presents an urgent call to all of us, to every individual, Catholics and non-Catholics. And it echoes a deep concern for what he referred to as our common home, which is a reference to the notion that we only have one planet, we only have one home. So, and we all live in the same home. And he interweaves spirituality with a compelling message to act for the environment. So incidentally, well, not surprisingly, he followed through with another letter called an apostolic exhortation, just very fresh, just yesterday. In fact, the official text of this was released just this morning, which is called Laudate Deum on the climate crisis. A letter about the climate crisis in particular, and talks a lot about the energy transition, which supplements the original encyclical in 2015. So, what is the essence of these messages? What's the essence of Pope Francis' letter, or now letters to all of us in regarding the environment? So, he takes a really firm stand against what he referred to as the throwaway culture and the rampant exploitation of nature, and he underscores in this letter, in this encyclical, the intrinsic link between the suffering of the poor and the ecological devastation that we are all witnessing across the world. And this call isn't merely a whisper to the Catholic faithful, it's a shout to humanity to collectively address the ethical, the cultural, and the economic paradigms that are contributing to this environmental crisis. And he is also recognizing the vulnerability of our home, of our common home. The encyclical throws light on the catastrophic impacts of the climate crisis, of deforestation, of biodiversity loss, and he's reminding us that all of this devastation affects especially the most vulnerable populations first and foremost. So all of these extreme things that we're already seeing, including massive heat waves, floods, severe storms, and other adverse impacts, disproportionately impact the poor. That's what he is emphasizing. And there is the inseparable connection between social justice and environmental stewardship. So therefore, Laudato Si propels us to recognize our shared responsibility towards the earth and towards each other. So that is the essence of it. And he, of course, describes all of these important issues that affect us in terms of the ecological crisis, and a lot of them are already much bigger than we ever imagined. Much bigger than some of us started working on these issues maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And whether it's the climate crisis, the loss of biodiversity, just all of the deterioration even of urban areas. We see all of this, and the Pope describes all of this in the encyclical, and what exhorts us to do something about it. Laudato Si, in much of its much at its core, is really an advocacy for environmental justice. It tells us about the requirement for a fundamental shift in our worldview, because we see the earth usually as just resources to be exploited. So the Pope reminds all of us that the earth is a sacred space to be protected, and the advocacy stems from an ethical and moral perspective, which should influence policymaking, all of our practices, especially business practices, and also our behaviors and our moral perspective towards sustainability. Here, of course, religious organizations, churches, and even, of course, universities and communities can act as catalysts, driving forward the message of ecological conversion and inspiring collective action. So what really is being emphasized as well here is that the ecological crisis is not just an environmental issue. It's actually a reflection of an inner spiritual crisis that affects all of us. But what's also deeply moving is how the spiritual aspect of the ecological crisis has been brought to the fore in the past several years, not just by Pope Francis, but because many faith communities in the world now look at the linkages between what we're experiencing in terms of this big planetary crisis, and what we need to be reflecting on in terms of our own inner conversion. So it challenges us to make sure that we intertwine the struggles for social justice and protecting the earth. So these are some of the most famous lines from the encyclical, which is to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, integrating questions of justice in debates about the environment. So it is what we call integral ecology. We cannot just look at the issue from an environmental standpoint, but engaging in actions on environmental justice, emphasizing that the cry of the poor emanate from the same plane of existence. No, so that is the emphasis here. And the Pope talks a lot about integral ecology, and basically integral ecology is made up of simple daily gestures which break with the logic of violence, exploitation, and selfishness. I mean, this is easier said than done. But what this really means is to look into the roots of this crisis, the economic, political system that really exacerbates the unsustainable practices that are pervasive of our life now. So Laudato Si also moves us to act. And action inspired by the framework of Laudato Si tells us to look at it from a multidimensional approach, and to bridge spiritual principles with tangible ecological initiatives. I'm going to walk through each of one of these very fast, but all of these actions is a form of discernment in terms of our response to the ecological crisis. It's what we refer to as a kairos moment, and these goals guide our actions. So there are 7, and I'll just walk through very quickly. It's a response to the cry of the earth, meaning a call to protect our home. We look at actions on the greater use of clean energy, for example, reducing fossil fuels. We heed the response to the cry of the poor through actions that protect and promote solidarity, with special attention to vulnerable groups. We must look at how the economy how the economy behaves, with actions that promote sustainable production and consumption, ethical investments, divestment from dirty energy, and supporting circular economies, and prioritizing the dignity of workers. We also see as a part of the actions in this set of goals, the adoption of simple lifestyles and promoting sobriety in the use of resources and energy and reducing waste. There's also the aspect of ecological education, where of course schools play a very important role, but also underscoring the importance of equitable access to education and leadership development for especially for the youth. And then there's ecological spirituality, which promote creation-centered liturgical celebrations and developing ecological catechesis as well. The last is community engagement and participatory action, which of course sits at the core of Catholic practices and tradition, which promotes advocacy and people's campaigns in local communities and also in neighborhoods. So this is what Laudato Si tells us to see, understand the crisis, discern the crisis, and be able to act and respond. I will end by saying that in embracing the ethos of Laudato Si, it also means acknowledging our intertwined journeys and taking really concrete, ambitious strides towards safeguarding our environment, both for the present and future generations. So the encyclical, supplemented by the new letter from yesterday, with the profound messages on interconnectedness. I think this is a letter that really emphasizes our interconnectedness. It emphasizes social justice and environmental stewardship. It should guide our journey towards a more just, more sustainable, and equitable future. So that I hope gives us a good picture of what the Pope wants us to understand in facing the ecological crisis. And after all, it is to all of us a summons to profound interior conversion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yeb Sano, for a very extensive discussion that gave us an understanding in a larger context of what Laudato Si is all about and how it relates to climate action. Yeah. Now, I think with all of these discussions that we have, with all of the inputs that you had, I think what struck me the most is the collaborative call for the community, particularly right now, the Jesuit community. So the Jesuit University network with 6 universities in the Philippines and 189 universities globally would be, I think, be the best group for a call of action. Thank you, sir. So let's move on to our next speaker. Of course, we have Father Jose Ramon Tizon Villarin, SJ. He's most commonly known as Father Jet. He was the Ateneo de Manila University's 30th president after serving as Xavier University's president. He is a climate scientist with a PhD in atmospheric sciences at Georgia Institute of Technology. Father Jet was also awarded the National Outstanding Youth Scientist in 2000 by the National Academy of Science and Technology. He also edited a book titled Disturbing Climate, which was conferred the National Book Award, particularly in sciences, by the Manila Critics Circle, the National Book Development Board, and later in 2002 by the NAST. So because of his work on greenhouse gas emission, Father Jet became part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a team of climate scientists that won the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize together with Al Gore. So he's now a trustee of the Ateneo de Naga University, Loyal School of Theology, MWSS, and of course, Ramon Magsaysay Foundation. He also chairs the board of Manila Observatory and Synergia Foundation. So Father Jets also write a column, God's Word Today, with other Jesuits for the Philippine Star. So let us all welcome Father Jet.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this exchange. I'm very happy to listen to Yeb Matagal ko na siyang kilala, si Yeb, and it's very much I consoled to hear Yeb, your piece on Laudato Si, and ngayon yung bago, no, Laudate Deum, which really means praise God. But it's again, I think Pope Francis is trying to address COP 28 yata to panghanda sa COP 28 sa Dubai. But anyway, I also smiled when you showed that there's a slide that you showed about spiritual crisis, no? And then ang pinakita mo ulap. Sabi ko, yun talaga yung part of the lack of integralness, kumbaga, is sometimes I think we've separated spirit and matter. Diba? Kung ano yung spiritual nasa malayo, ulap. And then yung lupa, hindi na yan spiritual. I think that's a first step towards well, coming closer to an integral ecology, is that we acknowledge that those dichotomies can be shallow sometimes. I think the incarnation sort of disabused us of this already, you know, this separation between spirit and matter. The world is good, matter is good, and that's why we also have sacraments, etc. Anyway, end of sermon. Thank you for this. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a social finance lab. Wala akong PowerPoint, so I just have some points to share with you. 10 minutes ba, Almer? Ilang minutes? 10?
Yes,
Five.
yes, Father, 10.
So first, you know, just an example, a concrete example. When I was at the helm of Ateneo de Manila, I said, let's try solar. We know our electricity consumption. I know my electricity bill every month, and it's in the millions. Is there a way to go solar? I remember that Greenpeace na blimp that says cleaner is cheaper. So if cleaner is cheaper, why aren't we clean? So anyway, so sabi ko, sige, early on, one of the first things I tried to do was even simple things like sidewalks, to create sidewalks here on campus, and to try to address that perennial traffic problem. Pero sabi ko, sige, solar. It took us 2 years, 2-3 years. Because I said, ayoko ng mga 100 kilowatt systems lang. Barya yan eh. Those are boutique things, boutique projects. I was hoping for something more substantial. 20% sana of whatever, how many gigawatt hours we consume. It was not easy. It took us a while. There were about 50 plus applicants, all vying to supply Ateneo de Manila. So, oh, dami naman pala. So, but hirap. Anyway, this is not the place. I just wanted to tell you that it's not that easy sometimes. You may have a dream, pero yan, ang daming kailangang asikasuhin along the way, your distribution inside, even reinforcing roofs. Sabi ko, lupa rin yan. So mo ilalagay yung mga panel sa bubong, and you'd have to reinforce those things, etc. Maganda siyang pero when the push comes to shove, you have to consider all these other factors. Thankfully, before I left, nandun na, nakaset na, and now you hear there is another call for a second phase. So I saw that recently in the blue board of Ateneo de Manila. Wala na akong alam kasi sa mga detalye, pero I was very happy to see this. So hopefully abot ng 50%. Malaki yun, hindi barya yun kung mabot ng 50%. Sabi ko nga, so it's such a natural choice kasi nga the peak of your electricity is during the day. Wala naman kasing pumapasok sa hating gabi. So it really tracks when you look at the energy curves, everything. So sana nga mangyari to. Anyway, what roles can the university play? Well, syempre, the university is a knowledge hub, a knowledge generator. So the first thing is research. In the green transition, we can do a lot in terms of resource assessment. We're doing that here at the Manila Observatory now. We're trying to validate our models, saying the Philippines is a resource-rich country. Of course, madaling sabihin yun, pero saan? Saan yung maulap? Saan yung maulan? Saan yung hindi? Diba? Saan yung mahangin? Saan yung hindi? Saan maraming tubig? Saan wala? For hydro and other things. So even that work of resource assessment is already something that we universities can do. We can also do something on resource forecasting. We've done this too now. We're doing it. Actually, we're asking, in a warmer world, 2050, will the sun disappear? I mean, even it will not disappear, but will it diminish in solar intent? Will it be more cloudy, for instance? Will there be more rain? And therefore, the resource might go down. Right? Hihina ba o lalakas yung hangin? Yung mga ganoon. And at least now, I can tell you, at least from our preliminary results, hindi gaano, 5% change or so in the resource. Even in a worst case scenario, like SPS, whatever, I forget now, or RCP, they're different emission pathways. The second part on research na talagang mahalaga is economics, finance and economics. Buti lang, di ba? Right now, I think the country is entertaining the possibility of modular nuclear reactors. Di ba? Sabi ko, ang reaction ko dyan, kwentahan natin. Let's cost it. May tinatawag na levelized cost of electricity ba yan? Let's look at this. But more than that, sabi ko, let's also look at the human resource component of this thing. Sabi ko, di nga natin maayos-ayos yung trend natin eh. Mag-nuclear reactor pa tayo. Diba? The human resource development that needs to happen, the training of scientists, are we just going to outsource this? Not to mention the waste. I don't know where to put the waste. So things like that, I think we need to look at the economics, and the university is well placed, with its schools and departments to tackle this head on. There's of course technological research, our engineers, batteries, etc. Pero lagay ko, paubayan na natin yan sa China at sa America. They're ahead in terms of even using a special type of salt or material for these things. But it will be and here I'll go into that later, but green mining will be an important issue, because we'll have to mine some of these things for these batteries. The other kind of research and technology is really system integration, how to bring these different elements together. I think that's something that the university can at least, try its hand on. The second role, aside from research, is as convener. We did this before in certain contentious issues like mining. We were trying to project the university as a place where you can bring all sorts of people to the table, and they can argue, they can fight without, I guess, without destroying each other's dignity. We invited miners. We wanted to get their side. We wanted to get the anti-mining community also get their side. Diba? The university is supposedly a disinterested party, and it can bring together these disparate groups to the table. The other one is templating. I call it templating because I don't know if we can really move the needle, so to speak. Pero we can at least show the world that there are certain things that work, there are certain things that do not work. And here, the university is well placed to do pilot systems, pilot technologies, etc. So that sometimes we use the word extension, but I don't like that word. No, it comes really from agriculture. No? Parang one way, the university is where a lot of nice things are invented and then they get passed on to the farmer. They get, hindi ganon. There's mutual learning here, especially between the university's academics and practitioners. So dapat may mutual pagtatalaban yun. The last part I just wanted to share is really, well, the university is also teaching university. So it's in the business of transforming cultures. You do it one person at a time, knowing that structures and systems are also important, because structures and systems also produce bad behavior. So yon, wide-eyed lang. But the university is a place where you try to look at how we change people's minds and hearts, and at the same time address the changes and transformations needed in systems and structures and cultures. Yun lang. I stop there. Salamat.
Thank you, Father Jet, for those thoughts. No, indeed, universities have so much, given that the Jesuit universities are producing tens of thousands of graduates. No, and they spend 4 years, maybe even 10 years, 12 years if they start from grade school. And we are producing the next generation of leaders and change makers. And then pwedeng tagos hanggang sa spirituality yung formation nila, so that they're better equipped to help reverse the trends that are happening sa climate. One such example we have, buti nahatak natin, is a recent graduate from Ateneo de Manila. And while he was a student, they had a project which evolved into a startup, which is now called SolX. And they have received impact investments and delivered 300 million pesos worth of energy savings through their startup. So it's inspiring to see how the next generation can be making an amazing impact through the work that they start in the academe. So I'd like to share their stories is Sergius Santos. Sergius?
Hi everyone. Hi Father Jet and Sir Bobby. So ayun, I'm Serge. I graduated 2017 in Ateneo. So from 2012 to 2017, Ateneo ECE. So Father Jet was our university president during that time. So ayun, basically, it's actually technically not a student project, but we were conceptualizing it in during university. So what happened was we were, at least personally, I was invited to a power camp by the Lopez Group, the largest renewable energy company in the Philippines. It's really to recruit students, because energy industry in the Philippines is very esoteric. It's really hard to know what are the opportunities for students in order to, basically innovate or to do something about the regulation. So luckily I was immersed there. And then after that, I started a company along with some fellow Ateneans. But maybe just to cut the story short, we had, although we started in 2017, we were really struggling. We only just fully launched in mid 2019. The reason being is this is a very personal story for us, but we had some founder issues in our startup. So one of our previous co-founder misrepresented our company. There was some financial malice done, etc. So it was really we really had to grow emotionally from that experience. So I took a leave of absence from my master's in Japan to try and fix it. So basically, we didn't start from zero. We really start from negative, because we have a negative reputation. We have 0 clients, and the initial angel investment that we got was, when I came back, was around 30,000 pesos only. So the reason why I'm saying this is because the most important lesson that I learned from this is you really cannot do anything alone, especially when you want to do a big change. So the first thing I did when I came back is I talked to Doc Banjo from Ateneo. I said, this is our biggest problem. Everything was a mess. So how can we fix this? We need all the help that we can get. So actually, that was the first time that they introduced us to Doc John under AIPO to really try to help us in terms of our biggest issue. So the main reason that we closed our first client is really because of Ateneo. So they help us cold engage different clients, etc. But yeah, basically we don't have any traction. We don't have any credibility and reputation. So Ateneo borrowed that to us. And then because of that, everything started rolling. And to go more in depth about what we do as a company, there's a recent regulation that I think maybe some of you are aware that allows customers to buy directly from energy suppliers instead of buying from Meralco or the different distribution utility. Because effectively what's happening is this distribution utility just buys in bulk from the different power plants in the Philippines and sell it at a fixed rate to the customers. But the main gap or the main lapse in the regulation is this distribution utility are not incentivized to do a good portfolio management because they cannot put a higher cost if they do a good portfolio management. Effectively, they can just pass through whatever cost they get from power plants to the customer. So that's why the cost of electricity is really high because they're not incentivized to do that, especially in the provinces. They don't have enough purchasing power because the franchise area that they have is very limited. So what the government do is you can now basically buy from the supplier itself, effectively from the power plants with licenses. So, but the main issue there is how do you know which is the right fit supplier for you? Because the way the energy works is if you consume energy, if you produce energy from 8 to 5, someone has to take it right away because we don't have enough battery infrastructure. So in order to properly balance the grid, you have to put it to the right customers with the fit load schedule to use. So we developed basically an auction platform and a demand supply matching platform. We aggregate customer together so that they can leverage their portfolio and their profile. If, for example, a school such as Ateneo, you only consume energy from 8 to 5 and you cannot control it because it depends on the demand and you don't have effectively power purchase in order to leverage a better contract, we can bundle you with other type of customers to give you a flatter curve, which is technically a base load, which a lot of supplier likes. So that's what we do. We combine a lot of customers together and we also try to combine suppliers together wherein you can buy in terms of interval hours. You can buy from supplier A from 8 to 5 only and from supplier B from 5 to 8. We can even expose you to the spot market. So all those we analyze through our demand supply matching platform and our analytics platform. So far, our efforts have totaled to around, I think right now, around 400 million in terms of energy savings. And it will be announced soon, but we are going to be invested by the National Development Company. It's the first investment under the Startup Venture Fund in the Philippines, a co-investment by a Japanese corporation who's first entering in the Philippines. So we are really looking forward to partner with universities as well in basically enabling our advocacy of empowerment. I'm only here because I'm a scholar from high school all the way to the master's degree. So empowerment is really my personal passion in the company. So yeah, sorry if it went a bit over time. So thank you for inviting us here. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Sir Jus, for sharing your inspiring story. So our next speaker is Mr. Bobby Julian. Mr. Bobby Julian was a student of Ateneo de Manila from prep all the way until he graduated AB Philosophy. He worked initially in property and casualty insurance with focus on catastrophic events and health from 1979 to 1992. He then moved to advising infrastructure projects and then to social investments in environment and energy from 1995 to 2005. He is an instructor in public finance and policy at the Development Academy of the Philippines, honorary member of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy of the United Kingdom, and has been a consultant on finance for energy and environment within a risk management context from 2005 to present. Friends, let's welcome Mr. Bobby Julian.
Thank Thank you. Thank you, Malu. I wrote down a few notes because I haven't done this in a while. I think the most important point is that although the Philippines is not yet a member of the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is a global movement, but it has just energy transition plans aspirations, and they're built on 4 planks. The first one is expanding renewable energy. And if you read the papers, the biggest solar plants seem to be in the Philippines. You know? They're thinking about 3,500 megawatts plus 4,500 megawatt hours of battery. That's prime infrastructure. Solar Philippines is talking about 4 gigawatts in a single site, so it's huge. You know? And then if you think about all those offshore wind projects being planned, it feels that it's already there. It's really not. The second plank is a green grid. It means, well, thing is, if you have a lot of projects, what normally holds it up is interconnection. So you can have a plant, but if you're not connected, you're not paid, you're not delivering energy, you're not paid, you're losing, right? So, and that has held us back for a very long time. The recent problems, I think stated nicely, with the National Grid Corporation is they're not connecting as they planned, right? Not as quickly. And considering we need to be more connected to renewables, it's even further delayed. Go back to the first thing, and that I think has implications for expanding renewable energy use of cities. See, the current administration has directives. I don't know how you'd call it, directing central governments and local governments to use more renewable energy. How? I don't know. The Department of Energy itself is not. They don't have much solar on their roofs. Okay. The third plank for this just energy transition is the building of a base for offshore wind. Ginagaya ata nito yung UK, where they use Aberdeen, which is basically the base for the building out of the rigs in the North Sea. So you need that logistic base now. So that's what's being proposed by the DOE. And the last, of course, is a voluntary retirement of coal plants. And then they cite especially that Ayala Energy is thinking about retiring their coal plant. Of course, they'll be compensated for it. Why they got into coal in the first place is beyond me, because their chairman at that time was the chair of WWF Philippines. Stories. But now, what do I think? There are specific difficulties with this plan. No? Una, you can write policy, you can have but there's no effective control. There's no way the DOE, the government, can make this happen. I think, as Sergio said, what we have are incentives, but the incentives, if they're not well crafted, they don't work. Right now, no matter what is said, the people who build the plants are actually building more coal plants and gas plants, right? We've transitioned. I don't think you'll see a lot more coal, but you'll see a lot more gas. Yeah. Now, it's nice. They call gas a transition fuel. Of course, I'd like to point out that it was a transition fuel 20 years ago. No, so you can only transition for a particular period. Olana, I think we're past that already. I think we should do away with gas. It's the bigger threat kesa coal. Not only because it's methane, no. And second is, this bias of the DOE is into big plants and large networks, and there are particular problems with that too. With the big plants, for instance, coal and gas, sites are getting limited. So yun, di ba? Kasi that needs a coal plant, a thermal plant, no, needs water. Diba? And in many cases, in other countries like China, diba, yung mga northeastern coal plants nila had to shut down because of a lack of water this summer and previous summers. The same will happen to the gas plants. Diba? Second, grid enlargement. Right now, how many islands do we have on the national grid? 8. connecting 9 if they do Mindoro. How many islands do we have? 7,107. So, you leave out a lot. Okay. Finally, I think that particular policy, it misses one of the values of renewables, scalability. I mean, our first meeting with solar was probably in our calculators. And now we're looking at 4 gigawatt plants. But you can have it as small as what you see in a calculator and a watch, and as big as a 4 gigawatt plant. And wind. I mean, now you're seeing offshore winds with like 5-7 megawatt towers. Turbines. But when I first saw these ones, the biggest I saw were like 600. And there's certain wind turbines which can fit on top of a house. So, all this talk about these large plants miss out a lot of the useful characteristics of the technology, of the resource. Now, I think more importantly is that what I think about these plants, what it misses out on the consumer. It's all talking big plants and large networks. But you almost take out the consumer from the equation. You don't even listen to him. Does he want another big plant? No. You assume that he'll be happy whatever you can give him. But the point is, if you look at it, not only are we getting more fossil fuel plants, we're getting higher prices. Sometimes many of the policymakers miss that as late as 1992, siguro 2/3 of the installed capacity of electricity in the Philippines was already 66%. So we've come down. We haven't come up. We're talking about trying to get to 10% or 20%, but we've already got 66 at installed capacity, not in generation. So, and that was triggered very simply not by a desire in the 1970s for clean energy, but rather because of the oil crisis in 73. I remember when I think I was fourth year high school nandiyan. So it was a weekend, so we had a party. Friday, the price of gasoline was 35 centavos per liter. Saturday, during our parties, 350 na, so we couldn't go. That's what drove, because the Philippines was completely dependent on oil, both for transportation and power. Heavy fuel oil for the power plants. We had to look to our own resources. So the theme then was indigenous, and most of the indigenous were renewables. That's why we got our lead in geothermal and so forth. Okay. Now, the thing is with this, think about leaving the consumer out. It also misses, at the level of the consumer, the decision to use or not to use energy becomes a clearer moral and even spiritual decision. Deciding between fossil fuel and renewables is not simply a techno-economic decision. But siguro, especially knowing what we know now, I mean, if you were talking about a small tindera doing barbecue and therefore using charcoal, sige, no choice, But we're not in the same position. We know the impact of fossil fuel. So, if you do it and you knowingly do it, then obviously that's already an immoral act. I mean, at least an act with the moral weight. Okay? So, lastly, in energy in universities, sa akin, my hope is that the universities, especially the Jesuit universities, can lead in building up the intellectual edifice needed for this energy transition. And well-based exactly on moral principles and the Laudato, the spiritual. Kasi, I listen to many people talking about clean energy, and clean energy is good. I mean, hindi na, that won't sell anymore. You'll have to work that down to why. And you'll find that at the very root of it, as Yeb clearly explained, it will be a moral decision. Now, what can be done? So sa akin, that's the first, di ba? It's the intellectual edifice, well-founded on moral and spiritual values. Second, there's much talk now about Laudato Si University, sometimes applying to mostly to the Jesuit universities. It's an aspiration. But sa akin, pag hindi mo pinalamanan, you don't put any content, you don't show a path. After a while, it's going to be like terms sustainable, resilient, di ba? Empty. So, there has to be a path. So that's the second path after the intellectual edifice. So it's in thought, in word, and deed. Diba? Now, what are the problems? Even for Jesuit universities, even for what you do in the Jesuit university. For instance, I know Ateneo, the Manila. Wala nang choice. You will have to do more air conditioning because it's getting warmer. And in many countries, they'll have to do heating because it's getting colder. So all of that will require energy. Diba? And if we go increase the energy the way what we're doing now, we just increase it in the same proportions. It's just going to create it's going to foster the very things that are driving the heat and cold in the first place. So it's a vicious cycle. Diba? So we have to address that, but how? Tama si Jet. Diba? If you look at the use for aircon, it'll probably peak around 10 to 2 o'clock, maybe even 9 to 3, which is around where solar also peaks. So it's a perfect match, diba? Perfect match. And then there's also transportation. Na-traffic na rin ako madalas sa Katipunan. And I remember before, you could lie down on Katipunan and not get run over during my time, at the risk of being carbon dated. Diba? Now you cannot even lie down. Okay. Now, how do you deal with that? I mean, if we look at the pollution aspect and the carbon, people say electric vehicles. Yeah, but probably it's less polluting, but you have the same number of vehicles. Diba? So the solution to that has to be much more nuanced. Diba? And I again, at the risk of being carbon dated, when we had far less students in Ateneo, we were all on buses. Now we have far more students and they're all on cars. So sabi ko, something is amiss, diba? So sometimes I think our solution to the transportation problem is out of whack. I remember pag Christmas, hindi pa palagi mahirap maghanap ng taxi. So everybody complained, and then what the Department of Transportation did was add more taxis, which created more traffic, which made it more difficult for the taxis to get to use. Palaki lang ng palaki. So let me end now. My professor in philosophy, si Father Roque Furios, he used to say, madaling maging tao, mahirap magpakatao. I think this is from Aquinas, the acta hominis and the acta humanus. So the distinction between the act of a man and the act of the human being. Much of our knee-jerk reaction kasi, and the distinction is the act of a human being is voluntary, it's willful, it's done. It has a clear goal in mind and a clear path to that goal. Now, if we apply that, diba, to how we're developing energy, maraming butas, no? Diba? It's not that way at all. So I think I want to end by saying it's the decision to use energy, generate, use all that is a moral and spiritual decision. And energy, I mean, thought of in a larger context, doesn't refer to electricity alone. I mean, there is physical energy, there is moral stability and courage, there is spiritual energy. In that context, if we were to interpret energy that way, perhaps we might be able to view this more correctly. Thanks. I'm sorry if I got over time. Napakwento lang.
Po, maraming salamat po, Sir Bobby Julian, for that, for sharing your thoughts and for sharing also at the same time some possible actions that we can do on how we can get into energy transition. So our next speaker is Professor Richard Cruz. He is an alumnus of the Ateneo de Manila University and faculty at the Asian Institute of Management teaching Impact First Investing. He completed his Master in Business Administration with distinction in Asian Institute of Management. He also completed his Bachelor of Science in Management Engineering at the Ateneo de Manila University in 1992. He has wide consulting experiences, and this would include his work at the Nestle Philippines, Smart Communications, Globe Telecom, San Miguel Corporation, Ayala Land, Mega World, DMCI, Holcim Philippines, Myron Philippines, Harbor Center Port Terminal Incorporated, SGB and Company, United Laboratories, and DNL Industries. He's also a startup advisor to InvestEd, One Export Pushcart PH. He started this one in year 2015 until present. And he is also currently working actively with QBO Idea Space and with TechShake X Hub Tokyo. This afternoon, Professor Cruz will share his thoughts on the growing role of impact investments in advancing social good and how students can deploy their influence through student-driven climate action or energy transition projects. Friends, let's welcome Professor Cruz.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Malu, and thank you so much, Elmer, for inviting me here to this Jesuit University Network conversation on Social Finance Lab. Hello, Father Jet. I don't know if you remember, we sat on the board together at AIM way back. So I'm very grateful. If I may just take a minute or so just to talk about my personal journey. Being an alumnus of AIM, I think it's critical for the administrators and the educational leaders to really understand in depth the journey of your students and how eventually your students today become hopefully the leaders of the solutions. Maybe not in the too far future because we need a lot of leaders already. I came from Philippine Science. I was surrounded by very smart people. But when I graduated, I didn't want to go to UP where normally most of the PSI graduates go. I felt a deeper need to understand the world with a broader, more holistic point of view. And I felt very strongly that I had to go to the Ateneo. So maybe out of a class of 200 plus Philippine Science graduates, only 10 of us went to Ateneo. And I'm very happy. I enrolled in management engineering, and at the time we were branded to be very good at many things, but not a specialist at anything. And then I realized many years later that there was this term that was going to come out, which is this term called expert generalist, which basically means that we need people who can work with many different other kinds of specialists, but has deep understanding in different systems so that they can help lead innovation and new solution development. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be invited by Elmer, and I look forward to hopefully participating more in this platform. So I have a lot of experience working in business. Although I did come from a business school, I really consider myself to be not so much an academic, but more of a practitioner. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is really that a lot of this has to do with governance, ultimately. And I agree definitely with what Bobby was saying earlier. In fact, it's a little both disheartening and heartening at the same time that I've been listening to some of my seniors, maybe those that are maybe one generation ahead of me, those who have led banks, they have led large corporations. And when we listen to them speak in very intimate settings, one of their biggest regrets actually is that despite their ability to get to the highest level of governance in their organization, perhaps a lot due to the skills and the characteristics that they developed over their education. Several of them have said very bluntly that their biggest regret actually was their inability to incorporate the values that they learned in their Catholic education as part of their governance. And having had the benefit of listening to the wisdom of those that have come before us, I feel like personally it's my mission today to really collaborate, with a wide group of people, and try to maybe answer certain challenges. No? So I think in general, when we talk about this Jesuit University network and having a social lab, I think from my perspective, having worked with businesses in a very practical practitioner way, the challenge really is how do we encourage the businesses, or more specifically the governance, the board, the senior managers, how do we convince them to step out of successful models and experiment and invest their money in new core business models that will be more relevant and more responsive to the changing environment that we have. And they need to be built in a context where the governance is not just purely profit measurement, but it really will have to be more about impact measurement, which is still, as I was saying earlier, something that needs to be studied more intently, more deeply, so that we can really develop the next generation leaders who will run organizations, not just based on their economic sustainability, but also their impact. And I'm very happy that we're talking about this in the context of our Catholic values, in the context of Laudato Si. I think that it gives it more meaning to our graduates when we talk about it, not just in the context of regulatory ESG from the SEC point of view, for example, or sustainable finance from the financial sector's point of view, but really from a deeper values, from a deeper place, from our values, and from our real, genuine sense of justice towards nature and towards other people. And of course, what I've had the benefit of observing really was the ability to create these new solutions and hopefully to scale them. Okay. And the leverage point that I'm talking about today is like, how might we leverage impact investing? So, just to help us visually, part of the day-to-day challenge that I have is to work with boards and companies and convince them that, okay, you're right here right now. And how are we going to work together to figure out how we might move to other business models that have a more balanced impact, something that is more sustainable for the next 50 years. And this is a challenge. So if you notice, there are three considerations here: economic considerations, ecological, and social. And the reality is it's not easy. And the most common experience that I have is that companies will say one thing but do another. And I think there's really a need to be more open about the fears and the challenges as to why this transition may not happen sooner or faster. Okay. And if they will not transform, then maybe what we need to do is we need to generate or develop the next generation entrepreneurs who will build the startups that will actually embody these values from the very, very beginning. So maybe we need to consider transforming existing businesses, but we also need to consider giving birth to next generation businesses that are already better balanced and more aligned to these values. I just have two more slides, maybe just about what I wanted to share. If from a capital markets point of view, I think visually, what we're trying to say is that when we talk about social investment, most of the money today is basically in this space. That the primary motivation is financial return, but not so much the impact. No? And in terms of where we want to move when we talk about impact investment, what we're saying is we want the money or the investors to move from this space, and we want them actually to move somewhere into the right side here. So what we're saying is we want evidence-based metrics of impact. The SDGs, for example, is one example of a menu, so to speak, of where the impact might happen. Laudato Si, of course, talks about where we would like to see that impact. But to make that sustainable from a capital markets point of view, then it does have to earn some kind of return. And this is the basic challenge today. Do we have business models that are designed to create both the impact and the sustainable rate of return so that funds can continuously flow? Okay. So what are some of the key challenges that I see for this group today? So one is, how might we leverage this initiative this social finance lab across different Jesuit universities. How might we leverage the laboratory, considering that it's being built outside of the current structure of the university? So it's not it's not within the performance metrics of those running the school probably at the moment. So it's not yet maybe part of the core. So how might we leverage this to create prototypes and new models that will respond to the needs of the community? And when I say new models, I'm not just talking about new energy models, but everything else that is a precondition also to having new energy models, which is, do we have the supply chain needed to support all the enterprises or models that will be consuming this new energy? Okay. By the way, when I talk about energy, because I had a very huge health scare many years ago, I'm also very curious about studying my own energy within myself. So I study things that affect my mitochondria. I study the effect of sleep and diet and food on my own personal energy so that I can inspire others to allocate their energy to the creation of these new models. And therefore, I think about energy also in terms of like food production. I think about energy in terms of like being able to create comfortable shelters where people can rest and relax and recharge and work and be creative, etc. So my definition of energy is actually quite broad. And I can think about the innovations happening in several horizons. So maybe in the near term, we're talking about innovations adjacent to the existing power system. But in the future, we might really be thinking about energy in a larger, more meta way, and to think about how this energy can be created more accessibly, more affordably, so that people can have the energy so that they can develop themselves better. So how might we leverage the lab? And of course, I read the website about the lab. So maybe one of the challenges is to really figure out, if we believe that this lab should be leveraged, what should the capabilities, features, and resources be so that more collaborators will come on board, more investors will come on board, to incentivize more students and more teachers to join? What kind of stakeholders, relationships, and commitments should we explore to make this happen? And when it comes to impact investment per se, hopefully the universities can figure out what is their contribution to the formation of this kind of capital market in the future. I'm pretty sure that the existing capital markets, whether banking or equity or investments, many of them have been graduates of our universities. So the question is, how can we create this new market if we're not yet teaching it or discussing it at the university level to shape the future leaders? No. So how might we understand the transformation of social finance and the design of impact investment funds so that it may become a high impact leverage point for change to allow us to respond to the call for justice and fulfill our highest human potential? And maybe finally, also because I'm very much interested in the transformation of education for the next several decades. And we understand, and I know for a fact that there's a high level of dissatisfaction or a growing level of dissatisfaction when it comes to perceived value of education. Medyo namamahala na yung iba or nahihirapan na sa access, or yung mga libre, yung access, hindi naman maganda yung quality. So we might also think about this initiative or this platform as a leverage to also ask ourselves, how might we change or how might we understand how this platform might disrupt learning, how it might bring students closer to the problem. I think my favorite analogy here, having been a teacher for a long time, is that these kinds of projects in schools normally would be like your capstone project at the end of a course. And it would be used more like to prove what you have learned during the course. And I think the hypothesis that I have moving forward is that what brings students to schools is really the projects and the problems that they want to work on. And the learning in the classroom really is meant just to enable them to solve those problems in a more impactful way. So therefore, it's kind of like the arrows reversed. Instead of the capstone being proof of learning from the classroom, the classroom actually is the one that's enabling the execution or the creation of solutions in the project space or in the laboratory. So I've had this debate, and I hope that maybe this kind of initiative can also spark some kind of reflection among educators, among administrators, as to like what's the role of this kind of learning. If we just consider the learning aspect of it, no? Aside from the value of whatever might be developed within the laboratory. So I am grateful for the chance to share. I'm sure that we all have things that we're thinking about. You know, I would love to listen more to our speakers today and just understand more deeply what they're concerned about or what they're thinking about. So I do hope that this new way of collaboration hopefully can bring about new insights and then maybe some new action. Because definitely, I think when we study complexity, one of the most important, urgent responses actually is to create these new ways of collaboration and communication so that we can be kind of stimulated in a different way compared to maybe the traditional ways of pursuing these kinds of problems. So thank you so much.
So thank you, Sir Richard, for that inspiring presentation and for sharing, specifically for posing that challenge on how we can come up with business model which are sustainable, balancing aspects relative to economy, ecology, and including the social aspect. So at this time, we can move to our discussion. So for the other panel members, maraming salamat po. So we can, at this point, I'd like to ask everyone to turn on your video cameras, if you can, so that we can make this discussion engaging and more dynamic. So you can raise your hands and we'll unmute you if you'd like to join in the discussion. So I'll start by asking a few questions and then we'll take questions from the floor. Okay, so I'll take the first question. So for those coming from different Jesuit campuses who are actually here in our virtual room, what possible initiatives can be done in collaboration also with the lab in time for this second semester? So if based on the discussions and including presentations which the panelists shared with us, do you have some thoughts which you have in mind in terms of specific actions or initiatives? Okay, so I'll now request our panelists and some members of those who are here in the virtual room to share. Okay, sino po yung meron na po ba tayong naisip? Oo. So my colleagues are actually here, Ryben and Dean Josh. Oo. So
Yes,
if you
maybe we can
Yes,
ask
sir.
si Father Jet, no? You sit on the boards, you were previous president of Xavier, so medyo kachat nyo, text lang, you can easily reach out to decision makers, and that's how it happens. Pag text lang. But I also understand na universities are also pretty rigid bureaucracies. How might we create a space? No? Maybe outsiders like us can provide some connections that are otherwise difficult from within the bureaucracy. But do you have any thoughts on that, Father Jet?
Well, you're right in the sense that universities can also be rigid places. No, some of the most conservative places are in schools. No, there is inertia, but also it's a mix. You also have one of the most creative thinkers, the ones who challenge the status quo. They're also in the schools. The presence of students, of youth, that helps also challenge our presuppositions. But I think are you asking, Elmer, about, let's say, the presence of trustees who are captains of industry? Yun ba yan? and how to engage these people. I'm sorry, yun ba yung tanong mo?
Well, yeah, I guess on the one hand, there are the students and there are tens of thousands. And then to Richard's point, captains of industry are your alumni. Di ba? Parang magpa-alumni meeting ka among investment bankers na you'll be surprised that all of them many of them are just waiting to be called. And how might we create spaces like those? No, there's the Rockwell is right there in Makati and dali-daling puntahan. Kailangan lang may magpatawag. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think what Richard mentioned a while ago, the regret of the CEOs. I can understand though. I can understand how difficult it is. On the one hand, you have values, diba? But I guess I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, meaning they're struggling, they're agonizing over these choices, and it's not always easy. But yeah, alumni, we have many alumni gatherings, and actually I learn a lot from these things also. Even conversations with MVP, other than basketball. Nandun ako kahapon eh. Nakita ko siya. And I appreciate those times when we can tell them, or we can be with them and have this exchange. Alam mo, narinig ko lang, kasi I remember one birthday of MVP. I said, our gift was a back to school program, meaning we will not talk business lang, we will talk philosophy, we will talk art, and I think they appreciated that. Our alumni, hindi naman lahat, may mga UP rin at Lasal, siyempre dun sa kanyang grupo, pero they came and yung iba pa nga nag-shorts parang back to school nga. But it was a multidisciplinary presentation on various topics. I talked about the origin of the universe and other things, the Big Bang. Maiba lang. And that was just a way to, I guess, establish a relationship with them. Because, yeah, it's easy to lose your bearings also. So the school can be that sanctuary, actually, where, you can come back and learn again, actually, and also tell us how complicated the world is. We know it's complicated, but tell us how, and see how we can work together on these shared concerns. So yeah, that's one. Programs like that, alumni, as you mentioned, alumni gatherings. Will we change? Will we influence? Alam mo, even just the presence of a Jesuit sort of, di ba? Parang if there's a Jesuit in the basketball team, parang magbabago na yung kanilang, magdadalawang isip sila kung magmumura sila eh. Di ba? Pero magmumura pa rin sila, di ba? Manggugulang pa rin. Pero there is a value there, di ba? They know, they remember the school where they studied, etc. Yeah. Anyway, but also help us actually how to deal with those of our alumni who have the power actually and the energy to change things. Anyway, that's a starting point for discussion. Bobby, may nakataas ang kamay.
Okay, so salamat po, Father Jet. So I think Father Jet is sharing na we have to start off with alumni gatherings, conversations with them, setting links. Kasi yun, I think yung po ang mga initial na pwedeng gawin. So si Sir Bobby is raising his hand. You have something to share po?
I was picking up from what Richard said earlier. Even when we teach our courses in finance and economics, we already, in undergraduate, if I remember correctly, it's no mention of values or social impact. Wala eh. Diba? So that carries on to business life. Parang when you're in a board or you're in a management meeting, there's no talk about values or social impacts. I think we should start in the university to make it normal to talk about values and social impacts when talking about finance, economics, di ba? Kasi, I mean, when we talk about economics, we talk about finance, we talk about resources, they always think about funds, di ba? Money. Human resources are always the biggest part, di ba? So the human impact must be included in the assessment, the economic assessment. Same with finance. I mean, money doesn't travel on its own, di ba? It's directed. If it's directed by a person, that person has a particular moral responsibility to what he does. So, you know, even if the undergraduate courses lang can have discussions within this context, if not in the classroom, outside, but talking about finance, economics, all this is the techno-economic thing, but with values around. Diba? Para pagdating nila sa business, hindi nakakahiya to bring it up. We don't need a special brown bag session where we talk about our values, but rather it's part of your regular management meeting, board of directors meeting. We've separated things. It's become like a homo economicus lang. We keep on thinking about the human aspect of, say, energy in this case. But what it should be is the other way around. We should talk about the energy aspects of being human. So economic aspects of being human. It's a turnaround there, but it can be, I think, injected into the curriculum very subtly. It will expand the discussion. Kasi when you deal with real life problems naman, these all come back. Diba? You cannot use a rigid economic theory to deal with the problems of very poor people. Diba? You exclude too much. Same with finance. So I think that's where we should start. If we're talking about the universities, diba? If it cannot be, it may be difficult to change over a curriculum right away, but you can I think you can slowly inject things there, and then you can have discussions siguro every half term, diba? About what this means for living and all that. Kaya hindi masyadong earth-shaking established academic curriculum. Yun, thank you.
Yes, Sir Elmer. Salamat, Sir Bobby, for really emphasizing the need to focus on the values. Though naman po, alam natin that Jesuit schools would normally integrate that in our curriculum, but you mentioned, you highlighted the need to really focus more on that. See, Sir Professor Cruz, you're also raising your hand po.
I wanted to double down on that point. No. So I was teaching finance for more than a decade. And a lot of the students that I've taught have moved on to senior positions. Over time, I've realized that when I was teaching them how to make investment decisions, NPV, IRR, payback, almost none of that analysis took into account a more holistic approach to governance. It was purely economic, salaries as a measurement of something, but not necessarily in the context of a more holistic approach to labor. So, in fact, I was so bothered by it that to some people, I apologize for my own contribution to the status quo because of maybe what I taught my students to do and what they did very well, but in reality, maybe it was kind of blind to some of the realities of this bigger system. No? So, I would say, although Bobby was saying kahit dahan-dahan lang natin i-inject siya, I would probably say it's probably more interesting to design a new course from scratch. Like if you had to have a BS management designed in 2020 or an MBA designed in 2020, and from doing it from scratch now, what would that look like? And how would we ask the teachers to approach how the subjects will be taught if we really wanted it to have its unique Jesuit worldview, right? Because if we teach accounting and finance the same way it's being taught in UP, then how does that make our graduate different when it comes to practicing that? So this is just my own experience, but I would be interested to hear the experiences of others and whether or not. And this is what I meant by actually, I hope the platform also becomes a venue for really reimagining the school. Because to be honest, the next generation systems, whether healthcare or energy or agriculture, etc., they will only be built by people who were trained in a different way. It's going to be very hard to change the system when you ask people who are trained to run the old system to be the ones. I mean, you have to have a very high level of self-awareness to know that you cannot behave the old way if you're trying to build a new system. And, there's a need to hold each other accountable for that higher level of self-awareness. So mahirap talaga. I approach it all with empathy also. I agree with Father Jet. We're not here to judge people, but we do want better results. So I'm not here to judge people, but I'm here to help transform those who have decision-making powers so that we can actually build the tangible things that will make a tangible impact in the lives of people. Like if we want to have a justice forum in the future, like sino may kasalanan nito, maybe I'll leave that to somebody else. But I think for me personally, it's really more about making sure that, the millions and millions of young people in our country have access to the resources that they need to develop themselves, or else it's going to be a vicious cycle, as Bobby was explaining earlier.
Okay, so salamat po, sir. So I think for those who are here coming from other Jesuit universities, we have to take note of that point shared by Sir. Sir Elmore, you're raising your hand po. You have something to share?
Yeah, quick question lang kay Richard. No? If we were to do a sprint workshop on this Laudato Si compliant MBA curriculum, sprint, how many days would that take? No? Just so that we see how to
Wala, si Elmer.
see compliant. How long would that take?
Well, the way it happens in prototyping is we take whatever time is available and then we make sure a prototype is developed at the end of that time. Because prototype lang naman siya, di ba? And then we will move to the next meeting and then review the prototype, etc. So I wouldn't say that there's any fixed time, but to be honest, even looking at it from the Ateneo brand point of view, from a business point of view, there's great potential actually to reimagine these courses from a uniquely Jesuit/Ateneo perspective, right? Because the tendency in education is to standardize. Actually, to assure quality, we tend to standardize across fields. But in this particular case, I don't know. I mean, so we can debate about it, like how do we get leaders who can genuinely live up to values and use the technical tools to get it done in the physical world. So it's I'm here because that's what I wanted to say. So Suntok sa buwan, I'm glad Father Jet is here because he's a big influencer. So it's not easy to ask that. I come from a university. I come from an academic setup. It's not easy to ask the university to consider that, no. But I think that's the reality. You can go to any industry conversation, healthcare, agriculture. I went to UPLB and told them, how can we blame agriculture? How can we fix it if UPLB will not change? Right? Since most of the leaders of agri come from UPLB, how can we be better if there's no transformation there in the school? And I think it's the same thing. Like if we are leaders of business and organizations, if we want them to change, we have to change also. And the learning experience has to change.
Okay, so thank you, sir. Sir Elmer, may tanong ka pa po? Okay, so sino pa po? Anyone who would like to share thoughts po in line with our conversation with the topic that we are actually discussing this afternoon? Any thoughts? Sir Bobby, oo. Nakataas, oo, yung
Taas kanina yata yan.
okay.
Magdadagdag na lang
Ivy,
ako. Kasi,
si
example
Sir
na lang.
Ivy.
For instance, when we teach finance or economics, the assumption, the supposition of teaching it is growth. Growth. But how much growth? Never question. So that speaks directly to what Yeb said earlier, unlimited growth. That's exactly That's exactly what's causing all this. Di ba? And sa akin nga, I don't know of any student who's courageous enough to ask his teacher, sir, how much growth? Di ba? Where do we stop? Di ba? Or what does growth mean in human terms? So, di ba? Kasi may supposition, may pre-definition na yung growth eh. But that's a root. That's one of the roots of the problem, di ba? So even those little things, questioning, di ba? It will, well, not upend. I hope not upend, but it'll give a different texture to the discipline, di ba? Which, you know, it was always there. Eh. I keep reminding some of my friends sa economics. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. He was not an economist. Diba? He talked about morality. And he framed this economics, diba, in those terms. And yet we've forgotten those roots. Diba? We're all in the technical thing. The measurement, we forgot. So sa akin, maybe we can bring it back to that. Diba? The fundamentals of the disciplines that we now take for granted that rule our thinking. Yun lang naman. Salamat.
Okay, so salamat po, Sir Bobby. Si Rybin from Ateneo, you have something to share?
Hello po. Okay ba mamalo yung ano ko, yung audio ko?
Yes, loud and clear,
Okay.
Rybin.
Yeah. Bali po sa experience naman po namin dito sa Ateneo, since ako po pala TBI manager, counterpart po ako ni Sir Benji dito sa admin. And since ako po yung naging lead applicant for our TBI grant sa DOST Fishery, we looked into revising the curriculum, especially yung technopreneurship na subject na offered sa iilang courses dito sa university. And isa po sa naging challenge sa amin is to how to yung parang palaganapin yung awareness, kasi ang problema po kasi doon sa technopreneurship, since iisa lang siya na subject and sometimes offered siya sa third year or fourth year or graduating, eventually po yung entrepreneurial mindset or yung parang continuity, for example, of any startups, medyo hindi na papatuloy because kulang po, no? So I think po based lang po doon sa mga conversation kanina, naisama po kasi namin sa conversation on how to trickle yung social entrepreneurship sa iba't ibang core subject sa aming per course. So sa amin po sa ECE, when we were trying to talk about dun sa technopreneurship, sabi namin hindi enough yung technopreneurship lang kasi dapat meron ng trickle na social entrepreneurship, or at least yung entrepreneurial mindset with values, yung social values sa mga first year up to their para at least yung sustainability ng startup, and I mean yung continuity ng startup hindi matatapos agad. So ang ginawa po namin right now, we identified yung mga subjects where we can trickle yung mga social entrepreneurship at saka yung values po, especially yung identity as yung Ignatian values. Kasi nakita po namin na katulad ng sinabi kanina ni Sir Bobby, hindi pa siya parang ready sa curriculum, yung sa revision. So ang ginawa namin po is tinatry na lang muna namin i-identify yung mga subjects where we can trickle yung mga yung ganun pong values po. Siguro po idagdag ko na rin lang in terms of like project collaboration, since banner program po namin just recently approved 2 weeks ago ng DOST is IoT, Internet of Things. So more on technology po kami. And ang maganda po dito sa Naga, siguro po ipagmalaki ko na lang po siguro yung startup stakeholders dito sa Naga, yung ecosystem po namin. Ang support po sa lahat ng government agencies and especially yung LGU in terms of like the development plan for smart cities or yung IoT. Naandyan po. So lagi po kaming regular na meet kung paano namin masisiguro na ma-meet namin yung development plan o ano yung mga projects na pwedeng masuportahan ng iba't ibang stakeholders including chamber, DTI, yung mga ganun po. So if ever man po merong projects concerning sa renewable energy or I think Naga will be very willing to to collaborate or ano po do the projects with any of the Jesuit schools po. Kasi I think yung ano namin, yung network namin dito is very healthy. Walang masyadong, I would say, walang masyadong politika. So, yan po. Thank you very much po.
So maraming salamat, Raybin, and for sharing how what you're doing, some initiatives within the university, including some collaborative efforts with our local government units. So probably I can also take off from that point kasi na-mention na rin po ni Raybin. So yung mga panelists po natin, siguro pwedeng you can share how, let's say, we can work with the local government units. So starting off from the university, so how can we work closely also with the local government units po? So siguro kung sino po pwedeng mag-share or anything that you have in mind. Yes, si Sir Richard po. Then I don't know if Raybin is still raising his hand. After Sir Richard.
Sige, I'll yield to Yeb muna.
Sir Yeb po.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, connected din naman to dun sa earlier question, and when we talk about how we engage with local governments, we're not talking about apples to apples here, no. Iba-iba yung levels of maturity ng bawat local government. They have different, sometimes ang laki ng disparity. I mean, you would have a local government with a lot of resources, and then you're talking about fifth-class municipalities. So I think yung sa aspect of what the universities can do, syempre meron kang immediate vicinity, di ba? And that's supposed to be a source of pride if you're able to work together with the local government where you are domiciled. So dapat yung na-champion ng university in that particular town, no, yung sustainability, all of these solutions, and pinag-usapan natin kanina yung whether we're Laudato Si compliant. Actually, masyadong mataas yung bar ng Laudato Si so I think we should just focus on the low-hanging fruits, no. So I would think also related to what could be sort of short-term initiatives is how we do outreach, no, other than the academic side na pwedeng research or integration into the curriculum. There's always the outreach side of things. So I would presume the universities do a lot of community outreach, and hindi lang naman energy yung pinag-usapan natin, because as our colleagues have already emphasized well enough, energy is complicated, no? Ang dami mong dadaanan na hoops dyan before you're able to even start a project, and we're looking at other aspects of sustainability, including consumption, including biodiversity issues, and then isa sa mga nakita kong very resonant with a lot of schools that we've worked with is yung pollution issue, especially on single-use plastics. A lot of universities could start implementing approaches towards modeling yung pag-manage ng plastics pollution, ano, and I think that's one of the easiest things to do for schools. Andyan din yung of course I would emphasize yung notion of intersectionality, kasi yung silos ng mga departments, for example, ano yan, natural silos yan, and these silos tend not to talk to each other. So when we look at Laudato Si, what we're being asked is to actually acknowledge our interconnectedness. So we could not be talking about energy or electronics and engineering in isolation of philosophy and social sciences and community development. So I think we could foster a lot more collaboration across the academic units and across departments, so that we see the issues in a more holistic way, therefore heeding the call of Laudato Si. So maraming pwedeng gawin, ano? I mean, in I think in many places there are a lot of even local environmental issues. For example, deforestation, river pollution. Ang daming pwedeng i-engage na issues at the local level. And as Father Jet kanina mentioned, the university has a lot of these creative minds, and LGUs are in the business of planning, no? Planning and unfortunately and sadly, most of the time, hindi coherent itong mga plans ng LGUs, and I think the universities are well placed to enhance the quality of these plans, whether it's comprehensive land use plans, disaster risk reduction management plans, and of course sustainability plans, no? Kasi minsan naghahanap lang ng ideas yung LGU, and I think universities being non-governmental in nature could really optimize those partnerships with local governments. Maswerte tayo kung may mga mayors na progressive and forward thinking, and maybe look for those particular political leaders.
Okay,
Thanks.
so yan po. Salamat po, Sir Yeb. Yung partnership ng LGU and the academic institution. So Sir Richard po.
My experience working with a lot of leaders, both LGU and let's say private sector, is that many of them don't have a vision of the future. Many of them cannot imagine what the future could be like. I read this thing in the US where they said that, science fiction movies, I'm talking about, Father Jet was saying, kailangan ibahin natin yung conversation minsan para hindi laging yung seryosong negosyo ang pinag-uusapan. In the world, science fiction played a big role in helping people imagine what's possible. And to be honest, a lot of the technological innovations were inspired by what young people saw in science fiction movies. So, you can argue like your phone today was the communicator in Star Trek, or, all these things. No? And when I think about it more deeply, I feel like the Philippines doesn't have that better of what the future of the Philippines will look like. The only document I've seen officially that talks about the future of the Philippines is the one from NEDA about Filipinas 2040, I think. No? And, the question about how we will get there will always come out. But I think what's also missing is like, where do we want to go? Or like, what could the future look like? I was in Bicol recently. I was actually in Naga recently with a group of AIM alumni. And I was trying to help facilitate a conversation about how they saw the future of Bicol. And I said, Bicol is such a beautiful place. You have beautiful natural resources. The people are interesting. The food is interesting. And yet I feel like there's not enough money and investment going into Bicol for some reason, right? And I think I said, I have a vision for Bicol, but I'm not from Bicol. But I would love to like swim in Caramoan and eat all of your food with coconut milk and, heal my body and all these things. So maybe one thing that we can explore, which would also make us different from other, because if you say we're an incubator, unfortunately, a lot of the non-university or non-Catholic university related incubators, their model is like VC and I want to become a unicorn. Yun yung path na ini-explore nila. Ito kasi ibang path ito eh. Kaya hindi rin pwede VC dito kasi hindi ganon din yung outcome na hinahanap yata nitong lab na to eh. Kasi kung Laudato Si yung direction, hindi talaga pwede yung traditional na VC na context. Hindi rin pwedeng kopyahin basta yung accelerator model ng ganong ecosystem. I mean, there's really a different kind of ecosystem that's needed. And it has to have its own narrative, its own language. The unicorns, they have this list, like how many unicorns are there in the Philippines? Sure, but but we were not talking about like how can Palawan become even the most, or like how Bicol or how. So who will tell that story? Who will nurture the imagination of the people who will tell that story? How can we convert it into the media channels? How can it become blockbuster movies or something? Baka that's also leveraging the other part of the university. Hindi naman lagi yung engineering part, right? Kasi clearly we cannot leave the future only to the engineers. It really has to be like a collective effort of everybody from different perspectives.
So thank you, sir, and also for the kind words about Bicol and Naga. Sige po. Si Father Jet, you have something to say po.
Yeah, sorry kasi I have to go in a while kasi may misa pa ako eh. Sorry sa community. But to go sa LGU, 2 weeks ago we had this national summit. I'm part of this group called Sinergia with Nene Guevara. It's really a gathering of mayors, and we were very pleased to see so many mayors attend. Anyway, prior to the meeting itself, I was just talking to some former politicians, and siyempre napunta yung usapan sa eleksyon at yung bayaran, di ba? Yung talagang ang hirap manalo ngayon kung wala kang pera talaga. At kailangan mong bayaran. At naghahambil lang kami yung mga presyo. Magkano yung binabayad sa ganitong LGU. Sa national, siguro mga 5,000 pesos. Pero pagdating sa local, maabot ng 20,000 minsan eh. So kung wala kang pera, hindi mo mabibili yung mga botante. Wala talaga, hindi ka manalo. So I asked them, we are 7,000 islands. Meron pa isang isa lang na hindi nangyayari ito. Itong bayaran. Meron naman. Sabi lang, meron naman daw. So paano nangyayari yun? Paano na hindi pa sila natitilamsikan ng korupsyon? So ano ba to? Paraiso lang ba to na it's just a matter of time? And then in that forum, the first panel we invited were what we call millennial mayors, mga batang mayor. And again, well, I was very much heartened to see their dreams, kasi mga bata to eh. So, isa doon si Biko ng Pasig. Pero I was surprised kasi he was quite blunt. He said, tayo mga mayor, narinig naman natin yung mga 20%, 30%, di ba? Yung mga proyekto na yan. So isipin lang natin, kung 100 classroom ang kaya nating itayo, edi 80 na lang may tatayo kasi binabulsan natin yung 20 classroom eh. Ganun ba? Talaga sabi ko, wow, lakas nito tapang. Sabi ko, gaano katagal kaya? Gaano, magtatagal ba to? Yun ang takot ko eh. Sabi ko, baka ma-co-opt. And so I said, we have to take care of these people, these young ones eh. Back to school nga every so often. Baka, yun nga. I mean, yeah, people will become jaded. They'll say this is how the real world, so-called real world runs. But anyway, so I think our schools can be that sanctuary for young and old leaders, I think. Just just to recover bearings and to say, well, what's real? There's a lot of fakery actually in the real world. What's true? And to find allies there. The other thing I wanted to mention is, one strength that we have as Jesuit schools is the core curriculum. Nung nasa Cagayan ako, de Oro, yung tawag nila sa core curriculum minor. Panggulo. Yun yung, kasi I'm a major eh. He's my major. Yung mga philosophy na yan, yung mga minor tawag dyan. Hindi yan minor For the Jesuit school, that's core. That's foundation. And I think we who have been schooled through that system, we appreciate that we're not just with, if I'm an engineering student, ang kaklase ko, hindi lang engineering. Kaklase ko, kumukuha ng ibang kurso din, psychology, economics. Kaya natututo ako. and that you know, that tawag ba niyan, expert generalist Richard, hindi ko alam, pero that I think is a strength. You know, when I go back to my Jesuit community, I'm enriched because, you know, I'm in front of Rene Habeliana, who talks about Islam to me, or Tony De Castro, who talks history, and then they ask me about other things too. No, so I have to perform this real-time translation sometimes, is to be able to communicate and to learn from one another. That for me is such a, I don't know, a rich environment, very enriching thing that I think many people take for granted. When we take these core courses, our classmates are not just our majors. And for me, that broadens my horizon. Lastly, I just wanted to comment on the growth thing, because it's really a real dilemma. But Bobby, people have thought about it. I think I've read and seen some even TED videos on people questioning this assumption about unlimited growth and how it's driving us to ruin. And so people have been proposing things like a thriving model. Thriving, I don't know what that really means, but at least it's a counter to, you know, just continuous growth or meaningful. What does it mean to be a meaningful or ethical consumer? Kasi nga, di ba, if the economy is built on consumption, then yun talaga, maraming basura talaga, di ba? So anong klaseng consumption ang gusto natin mangyari, kasi we cannot not consume naman, di ba? So what kind of products, meaningful products and services do we create that, you know, I mean, markets for these meaningful things that actually provide value. I mean, the same values that we aspire for. So yun lang, I just wanted to end there. Salamat sa ano. Sorry, I have to go. Wala
Yes,
pa akong
Father
pamilya.
Jet. Maraming salamat po. Oo. So I'm just reminded, Father, with our Jesuit education courses, which are already integrated in all our in our curriculum. So time check, it's already 4:59, and we're having an interesting conversation this afternoon, but I think I have to request Sir Elmer to give some closing points before
Thank
we
you.
formally end. Yes, Sir Elmer.
Okay, thanks, Malu. Thanks everyone for your contributions, Richard, Bobby, Yeb, Arvin, Sergius. Well, you know, this was really thought-provoking, and I think yung idea ni Richard of next generation MBA program that is more attuned or more aligned with this Laudato Si, no? I think it will resonate because we are feeling the warming planet, eh. Yung parang mas, and then after the 2 years of pandemic, mas nako-comprehend na ng humanity how we are also interconnected, no? Not where we cannot think of just specific disciplines, no? How things are so interdependent, and that we need leaders who see those interconnections. And we will take up the challenge of prototyping, no? The sprinting a design and then challenging partner universities to prototype it, because we need to do this. No? Otherwise, we will be teaching our students and then our children and then our grandchildren the same curriculum that fooled us into thinking that we can do things, you know, and pursue unlimited growth without falling off the cliff. So thanks everyone, and we will be reaching back out to you for the next part of this conversation.
So maraming salamat po to our panelists, Sir Yeb Sano, Father Jet Villarian, Sir Bobby Julian, and Professor Richard Cruz, including Mr. Serius Santos. So what a good way to end this day, as we also celebrate our World Teachers Day with this very engaging and fruitful conversation. So we look forward to having efforts and initiatives in line with what were raised in our discussion and conversation this afternoon, keeping in mind the call for Laudato Si to focus on our care for the natural environment and all and the people as well. So thank you everyone. So we will be flashing the evaluation form, the evaluation link on the screen, and I'll be requesting the participants to fill it out so that you can claim your certificate. I suppose there's still another conversation, Sir Elmer, am I right?
Yes, parang bitin, it looks like we raised even more questions and which are even more compelling. So yes, we'll be reaching back out to you and so that we can take this forward and make this a reality. We owe it to our children to act on these problems that we have helped create. Yeah, so we should be prototyping the solutions.
For the older generation, they have to save their soul pa, Elmer. So
Oh,
don't
may
forget the
panon
older.
pa. Redemption.
Hindi ko alam kung ano yung provision sa Laudato Si para dun sa redemption, dun sa mga ano.
Sige, maraming salamat po. So sir, yung evaluation link po?
No, wala nang evaluation. No, that's fine.
Okay, sige. Sige. I'm sorry for that. Sige. So maraming salamat. So again, good afternoon.
Thanks everyone.